there's a lot of competition and we really need to find ways to diversify and really make our brand stand from them. And one of the things that's going to allow you to do that is having a brand identity. What is the story behind your brand? Who is going to be the person I'm going to target? How I will feel when it comes to engaging with this product. And with that, we managed to increase almost 40% the click-through rates. And actually, I use Axial for all of that from top to bottom. Not only has saved time, but has allowed me to be more accurate than ever when it comes to really creating a whole development plan for the brand.
Welcome to the Accio Playbook. I'm your host, Ziwei Chen, and joining me today is Vincenzo Toscano, the founder and CEO of eComsy, where he helps brands drive global growth on major e-commerce platforms such as Amazon, Walmart, and TikTok. Hello, Vincenzo. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, Shiva. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I am so excited for today's topic on brand identity. So just to kick off, I would love to just hear from you on why do you think this matters?
One of the most important things that we have to understand, especially when launching a brand online, is that there's a lot of competition, right? And we really need to find ways to diversify and really make our brand stand from them. And one of the things that's going to allow you to do that is having a brand identity. I think one of the mistakes we see consistently on brands that we work with, specifically, as you mentioned, on Amazon, is they're having a tough time because essentially the product becomes a commodity, right? They're really struggling to go beyond the features of the product. They only focus on maybe the material or the shape or the color. But what about how I will feel when it comes to engaging with this product? What is my lifestyle going to be impacted in different ways? Like maybe the solution you're going to bring to my life, how I'm going to feel after consuming this product. And this is something that we see and it comes see every single day. Like we
Mhm.
have, for example, a brand in the kitchen space, and this is something that always comes to my mind, that one of the main changes that we did and completely changed the performance of what they were achieving is going from feature focus to essentially feeling focus. Like, how do I feel when I'm cooking using this product? Or how do my kids react because I'm able to now do better dish for them? And with that, we managed to increase almost 40% the click-through rate. So this is something that I put a lot of emphasis, and if you're not, like, you definitely should, because that's where essentially you're going to be able to compete against most of the competitors in the space.
I love that. I think obviously feature innovation is one path, but what I'm hearing from you is you don't have to get stuck into one direction. What's beyond the capabilities or the functionality is the brand. I would assume that many of our listeners are already thinking, oh, maybe that is something that I should start with as next steps. So maybe my next question for you is, how did I get started? How do you typically approach building that identity for your brand?
Yeah, I would say one of the most important thing is what is the story behind your brand? Why you started this brand in the first place? Is it because you were having an issue when it comes to a specific need? Or maybe because it's a mission because you struggle with some specific cause and now you really want to provide back to that cause? It could be, supporting a specific maybe disease out there or maybe specific condition. Or it sometimes could be only from the perspective of you want to provide a lifestyle that you really believe in. Let's say you're doing something in the sports industry. So it's really understanding what is the mission behind that. Because at the end of the day, let's be honest, some of the biggest brands out there, the reason why you're willing to pay 3 times the normal price is because you believe their mission and what they're actually selling you in terms of lifestyle. So the first thing I would start is why I'm doing this, right? What I'm trying to convey every single time essentially a person sees my product and why they should trust me against other competitors. The second thing is defining an avatar. I think one of the most difficult things you're going to encounter when launching a brand is that if you don't have an avatar, it's going to be also very difficult to create a brand around that. Because if you don't know the age, the gender, how they look like, where are the base, like how you actually in the first place going to come up with a product that could be the perfect fit, right? So understand the avatar very well, because not only that's going to make your branding essentially convert better, but also things such as advertising is going to make it much more efficient, right? If you have your avatar very well defined, it's going to make sure you don't need to spend a lot of money trying to
Mhm.
figure that out, right? And I would say the last two is the identity, also in terms of the visuals and also how you convey the message is also very important. You have to be consistent. I see all the time, let's say your colors are only blue and white. then why you're gonna launch a campaign that has green and red? There is no consistency across the board. So having your brand guidelines, your palette, your logo being consistent across the board and your language as well, super, super important. And I would say the final one, what makes you different is super, super important because it's something you should be able to answer essentially within 1, 2 sentences. Like, why me? Why I'm different than the competitors, and why I'm going to bring you a better essential outcome if you buy my product. And I would say starting there is definitely these 4 points are the foundation to anything that you do moving forward, because that's what is going to allow you to understand which product you're going to launch, what is your price point, who is essentially going to be your message when it comes to all your campaigns from a branding perspective, from everything that you do moving forward. And that's going to make sure that you can essentially stay original, which I think, especially in today's age, is super important to be able to be seen over all the other huge competitors you're going to find on a specific niche. Yeah?
If I'm putting a hat on as a listener, there's a lot to think about. A lot of our users have been struggling with how do I put all of these into one package? And that really led us to our internal team's vision of building Axial, the AI agent specifically for product-based businesses. I'm curious that if you have used Axial where maybe Axial can help our audience fast track to get closer to the idea of what does my brand identity package will look like.
In fact, Axio has been such a huge help when it comes to even myself personally, because I actually launching myself a brand in something that I love, which is in the sunglasses space. Is something that I'm very passionate about. I'm sure if you talk to some people in the space, they will tell you I'm only using sunglasses. And actually, I use Axio for all of that from top to bottom. It was pretty much my best friend when it comes to that, and allow me to really understand everything. I mean, from details such as what is going to be my brand identity, who is going to be the person I'm going to target, what is going to be the price point I have to stay among, how I'm going to differentiate the product. That's been super, super useful because not only has saved time, but has allowed me to be more accurate than ever when it comes to really creating a whole development plan for the brand.
So if you could share your screen,
Sure.
and then we would love for you to talk through kind of what that experience has been.
Can see on my screen, this is essentially the AI agent that allows me to do all this brand development from zero. Starting, I would say, by the market analysis, like really understanding what the opportunity looks like. But I would say more important than that is the brand identity. Right? Brand identity is really what is going to allow you to really stand from your competition. And when I was coming up with this idea of how I'm going to make my brand unique, I really need to understand what is going to be the story behind this brand. What is essentially the feeling I want people to experience when they're buying this product. I was going to say essentially be the DNA, right? And as you can see with Axio, it was as simple as essentially engaging with the agent and saying, I want to launch a brand that essentially resembles Naples, because by the way, I'm Italian, I'm from Naples. So I wanted to really go back to my roots. That's the story of the brand. Then I wanted to make sure the brand is luxury, how I'm going to make sure my sunglasses are perceived as a luxury item. And the third thing was, how do I make sure this DNA is reflected across the whole family of products? And the nice thing of Axio is that, as you can see here, already gives you a summary of how the identity will look like. But something I really love is that usually when it does an analysis within the agent, it will give you also some analysis to go deeper into what the brand concept will be. And in here, for example, we can see how Axio gives me everything in terms of what the first insights, the process behind these insights, essentially how I'm gonna come up potentially focusing in terms of the design, the material, why this resemble the brand message. The nice thing of this is, going back to the topic, is that it all connects with brand identity. As you can see, everything has a reason. Everything connects to some, from the perspective of the story, from the perspective of the heritage, from the perspective of Naples, Italy, luxury. And this is something that really convinced me that before, if I'm honest, will take me days, if not weeks, to really come up with something like this. But within a few minutes, I knew straight away what I had to launch to the market. So every single time somebody sees Toscano, the sunglasses brand, they will feel everything that Axio is essentially trying to convey when it comes to the brand identity. Now, the second thing I also would like to bring to the screen is the competitors, right? Because for me, of course, the brand identity, and you can see some examples here coming up, some examples that Axios tried to generate, which, by the way, this is also such a game changer. Before, when I would launch a brand, I would have to sometimes have some examples that sometimes were drawn by hand by some of my designers or using our tools, but they were never really clear or really give you a perception how this product look in real world. And now Axiom makes that super, super easy, essentially giving you those templates on the fly. But going back to the competitors, something that is very important when you're designing your brand is really understanding where you stand. Because as I mentioned, yes, history is important, heritage is important, and what essentially you stand for. But you need to be realistic in terms of how you're going to compete against other brands. And being in the luxury space, I want you to understand how I compete against some of those brands. And this is something that all of you should be doing because this would essentially allow you to understand what is the price point you should be going for, what's your unique selling proposition, and why your product will have an advantage. In this case, I wanted to really understand how Toscano will have an advantage over some of these brands. And here clearly I could list all within the table and it will make it even more clear for me when it comes to launching the brand now. What are the messaging and consistently points that need to persuade through images, video, advertising campaigns, so they really understand why brand Toscano sunglasses is better than the competition. And I would say the final point, which is something that really helped me a lot, and I briefly just covered that, was the design orientation, the colors, because especially myself being a very technical person, and I would say this is something that when I talk even to our clients at eComsy, it's a very, very common issue. Like you're trying to come up with this brand that you have the idea in your mind, but you have never drafted even the concept in real life in terms of how the product will look like, how the colors are going to blend together, how the logo will look. And now by essentially using Accio within a few minutes, I already had the product really coming to life. Like something that was, as I mentioned, will take weeks now. I had it in front of me. I saw the logo, how it looks, how the glasses, also embedding with the picture, the brand kind of heritage. And it was very easy for me now to understand, okay, this is clearly where I want to go. And this is something that essentially is going to really reflect the goals I've been aiming for when it comes to the brand identity I've been building from the very scratch. It's definitely something that has completely changed the game for me.
Sounds like you started with some ideas, you had your story, you had your heritage, but then there's so many more things to think about, right? So you kind of just put that as a little package into Axial as the query, and then Axial would then flesh out all of these detailed options for you that, as you mentioned, without having you to pay for a designer or spending weeks of
Exactly.
time to think through all the options. While our session primarily focused on brand identity, we have also seen some of the manufacturers' information. So this goes
Yes.
kind of beyond just what Axio could do, that in addition to your identity, your avatar, your messaging, Axio can then, based on what you need on the requirements, and give you recommendations on the manufacturers. This is a sidetrack, but I think also helpful for our audience to understand what's the next step once I have a better idea on that. It's great to see how this entire process really gets accelerated and empower you to make better decisions along the way.
This has actually fast tracked not only the launch of my brand, but so many for clients. Like now, by using Axiot, things that will take us weeks, like within days or sometimes hours, we're able to have this in our hands. And we all know time is money, and being able to now come up with manufacturers, brand concepts, and ideas to really make a product different is really going to be an edge that I would say most people should be engaging with, especially entering into 2026. Yeah.
So far, we have talked a lot about your overall approach and specifically where Axio can support. I'm just curious, any additional last word to our audience in the topic of brand identity that maybe we haven't talked about that you would still love to highlight?
So I would say one of the most important things before going into launching your brand is listening to your audience, right? Like the reason why I'm also launching this brand is because when I was using the sunglasses I've been using at different conferences, so when meeting with my friends, I start hearing the feedback over and over, like, wow, we really like these designs. We've never seen these on stores. What about launching your own brand when it comes to this concept, this luxury version of with the Italian story? So I would say if you're already within a niche that you're hearing friends around you or people that you know that's really telling you, you know, we want something like this, that's usually a good signal for you to use as a starting point when it comes to the brand. And most of the time, they're going to tell you what they want and what they don't want, and be consistent with that. I would say that's the second thing. A big mistake people do when launching brands is that they're really here to essentially the consumer. They launch the brand, but then they get sidetracked because they're chasing maybe a shiny object, or they're really distracted in terms of what was the reason behind this brand in the first place. And if you're not consistent around your images, your messaging, and overall brand, you're going to essentially lose trust, and that's going to be very difficult for you to win back. And then the final thing is test a lot when you're launching the brand. Like something I'm going to be doing, for example, with this brand is I'm going to be able to essentially with Axial now come up with multiple models, and I'm going to be testing, because at the end of the day, one thing is what I think that people might like from a model perspective, but then people need to test these sunglasses. They need to see how they feel, if they like how they look. And then from the feedback, I will then come up essentially with the models that I know will be essentially the best sellers. And that's where they're going to scale. A big mistake is assuming that the initial kind of brand concept that you come up with is going to be the final one. And trust me, that's usually not the case. You're going to go through revisions. You need to essentially hear what people like, what doesn't like. And I think you need to keep your mind open to that. And I think if you implement these 3 tips, you're definitely going to have a successful journey, especially if you're putting a product into the market that's definitely making people's lives better, is solving issues, and it's providing something that they're not able to find with other generic brands out there that essentially are not going to be able to compete with you.
I can already see 3 additional exercises that our audience can do with Axio. It can be either learning more about your audience, it can be more about applying the same voice and all of that to new campaigns. And then it can also be getting support on the different variations to support your testing, etc. So it really is kind of an iterative process where Axio is your companion that helps you to automate research, give you options, ideas, and help you make faster and better decisions along the way.
That's right.
All right,
Yes.
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Vincenzo. I think this has been a very informative conversation. We started with why brand identity even matters. So if you're listening and you haven't thought about that, you probably should. And then we talked about your overall approach on what are the key areas you will start with. So again, great note-taking opportunities on all of these areas that you should check the boxes on. And then we talked about how Axio can really support you in that research ideation and coming up with option for you to choose from and then test out later as well. And then we ended with 3 additional key takeaways from you that can further empower our audience with their brands. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ziwei. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity.